Folks, just a new candle and I noticed it. That one seems to have burnt itself out. And then we'll get Facebook on board. Well, maybe I won't be lighting the candle for a noticed it. Right, well, it's lit now. Let's sort Facebook out. As you can see, there's only one Davey today. The other one's not feeling up yet, I'm afraid. Not feeling up yet. Edit privacy, go public. Right, I want to apologise to young Dylan. Young Dylan Keane, because as I watched the programme back and I was thanking people for the gifts that I'd received for charity and for myself, for some reason I said young Dean had given me whiskey when it was Dylan. Hi Nancy, so that's Facebook on Bob. Okay, so I'm sorry about that, Dylan. I think it's because Dean and the girls gave me the code and I had the name Dean stuck in my head, so my apologies, Dylan. Okay. Now, as I say, David's not in the best of form at the moment, so he won't be joining us today. He's suffering real bad with pain, which isn't surprising considering the operation he's went through. All right, so we're up at our 100 mark. So it's the Two Davies. Let's get this broadcast properly underway. It's the Two Davies on the 25th of the 4th, 2024. And this will be done in the style of Indie Truck Davy because there is only one Davy today. So it's Indie Truck Davy out the truck now home in his office in Salisbury, North Lanarkshire. But it's not a bad day. A wee bit overcast at the moment, 8 degrees. I think there's rain forecast for later. Alright, so that's the weather forecast for Salisbury, North Lanarkshire. You want to know what the weather's like with you? Look at your rain bloody windy. And then maybe drop a wee comment in the comments so I can see what the weather's like with you. Okay. Hey, hi Thomas. Hi Karen. Right. Oh well, it's been a busy day today, but we'll get to that. There are other stories to cover here in Scotland. Okay, but before we do that, there's a couple of things that I do want to mention. And on Saturday, I seen Donald Anderson. Donald's been kicking about the independence movement for twice as long as I've been alive, as far as I can tell. Donald's getting on a fair bit now. I don't think he's quite twice my age, but he's. It's raining in Duisburg, is it, Elizabeth? Sorry to hear that. Anyway, now Donald and a few others who are members of the John McLean Society have got a campaign going to get a centenary statue erected of John McLean in Glasgow. Now they're looking to raise 46,000. Now, if you want to contribute to a statue to the great man, or even just find out about him, you've got a crowdfunder at www.crowdfunder.co.uk/P/John McLean Statue Campaign. Okay, I'll put a link to that in the comments later. Now, as I say, if you want to know more about John McLean, one of the big great socialists of the time, and a member of the Red Glasgow Brigade, then look up the John McLean Society, okay? And if you can help them with a crowdfunder. Another thing I wanted to talk about was make sure you get registered to vote, folks. This election could be coming at any moment, so it could. But let's move on and start with what we need to talk about. All right. So, first story up, business confidence in Scotland is up to a 2-year high. Employment growth in Scotland is up 2.6% in the first quarter of 2024. Profit growth in Scotland is up 4% for the first quarter of 2024. UK average is 2.6%. Export growth is up 4%. And The only downside in the economic outlook we can see is the longer term effect for 2024 as the Brexit checks kick in and exporters suffer. Okay, now what the BMC is, whoever the hell these are. Now this report was commissioned by, believe it or not, the Institute of Accountants for England and Wales. So people in England and Wales are having a look at the confidence in business round about these islands, and the highest confidence, the highest growth, the highest exports is all coming from Scotland. Scotland's economy is continuing to grow. All right. And we know there's confidence because JP Morgan just opened his new office in Glasgow. The bank giant Morgan, they've just opened a new place in Glasgow. So there you go. Now with this BMC Scotland, which is the local accountancy mob, apparently says that the risk to growth is obviously the downturn that we're expecting in 2024, predicted by everybody, including the IMF. Now, what they're saying is there will be a downturn during 2024. We are return to growth again in 2025, allegedly. But apparently, the big risk to businesses here in Scotland is Scotland's tighter regulatory requirements than our UK, and Scotland's separate tax system. I don't see that being a problem. In fact, when we move on to Scotland's separate tax system, one of the other big stories in Scotland this week is that the unionists, the cuckoos in the nest, who have been screaming since the Scottish tax system went into existence properly in 2017, I think it was, and then being adjusted again last year to add another band. The cuckoos in the nest have been shouting Scotland's the highest tax part of the UK, which we now know isn't true for the ONS's figures, and for HM Treasury figures, and for HM Customs and Revenue figures. The other thing that isn't true, apparently, is that actually higher earners and middle earners are no free in Scotland. The stats are out, folks. The figures are out. Since the new tax system in Scotland came on, net inward migration is up. And we're adding an average of 4,200 new taxpayers to the system here in Scotland every year since the tax system has come into existence. Now, it appears that progressive, savvy people living elsewhere in these islands are looking at Scotland's progressive tax system and better public services and are moving here. There's only one downside I can see to that, and that is if they vote against independence. If they're savvy enough to move here to take advantage of our better, more progressive system, and let's hope they're progressive enough to want to break free for Westminster and take control of ourselves. Because having that many people moving into Scotland is alright, provided they don't get in the way of our main aims, and that is of independence. So it would appear that net inward migration is seen as add 4,200 a year more taxpayers to the system than what would be in Scotland if it wasn't for the new tax system. So the unionists are right. The high and middle earners are no fleeing, and the savvy progressive people who doing that road are looking at how Scotland's run, and they're moving up this road. There you go. Hi Dylan, hi Davey. Right, so when we put taxes up again next year by a wee bit, I wonder if they'll be screaming high earners will leave then. I think this is a stuffing taken right with them on this one. As we've already stated, we're 25,000 in Scotland, you pay an extra £6 a year. £6. And for that you get free prescriptions, free university tuition fee, better NHS, a social care system. Your children will be fed from primary 1 to 5 in schools, lunch free, and that's been rolled out to all primary school children. So the social contract up here is actually attracting people, and the more progressive tax system is actually attracting people, believe it or not, folks. That is interesting. Right. I know everybody's dying for me to get on to the problems that have just exploded in Hollywood, but we'll get there, okay? We'll get there. Now, the Scottish Government publishes latest paper in Scotland's future papers. This time the paper is Injustice. This is number 13, folks. This is how little coverage that these white papers are getting in the press. This is paper number 13, and the Scotland's future prospectus has been put out with the Scottish Government since Nicola Sturgeon won the election back in 2017. 2017, 2015, whatever it was. Anyway, since Nicola Sturgeon was First Minister. So this is the 13th. This time it covers justice. Now, as we know, Scotland has a separate legal system, which is protected under the Articles of Union. I think it's Article 19, if I remember correctly. I could look it up. I've got the book there. But anyway, the paper says what we can and could do with law under an independent Scotland, what we could do like with things like drug policy and that, because there are still areas of law which are reserved. Now, the law is mainly devolved, with a few things being reserved, like drugs policy and things like that. As we know, what a pain in the arse that one's been. So this paper covers what we could do with a legal system, if we chose to, after independence. So if you want to see this 13th white paper, you can access them all at the Scottish Government website, and you can access this one, paper number 13, at the Scottish Government website. You see, a lot of you don't even know that there's been 13 in the series, because the cuckoos in the nest who run the bloody media up here haven't been advertising the fact that this prospectus has been getting put out regularly to the people to give them a choice. Now, what the Scottish Government need to do is get to the end of this series of papers, slap them all into one book called the White Paper, like we had the last time, and start getting it out to people. Very few people read the White Paper the last time. If they had bothered their arse, we might well be independent by now. If people had bothered their arse reading the White Paper, it was a good prospectus. There was only a couple of areas where it got it wrong. And monetary policy was one of them. This idea that we would continue to use the Bank of England as the lender of last resort, Mr. Salmon's failure. Apart from that, the last prospectus was very, very good. I have a copy of that. And what the Scottish Government really needs to do is finish this series of papers, get them all together, slap them into one big tome, and get it out to people. Or what they could alternatively do to get people to bloody well pay attention is have the White Papers dictated onto some sort of media. And that way people can listen to them as opposed to read them if they're too bloody lazy to read them. As I say, if you want to see this latest, number 13 in the series, is on justice and how we could evolve the justice system going forward after independence. Okay. Now, the next one up, of course, is also on justice, because we have a full-on stooshy going between Westminster and Holyrood over the Horizon scandal with the Post Office. The Westminster's just passed a bit of legislation covering England and Wales, which they have extended to Northern Ireland, which has a separate legal system. But they haven't extended it to cover Scotland. Now, what they're saying is Scotland needs to pass their own bill, whom is no chuffed. And it started as Stushy. Because if it could have been extended to cover the separate legal system in Northern Ireland, then technically it could have been extended to cover the Scottish legal system too. Or could it? Well, the answer is no, it couldn't. I don't know what this is all about, this Stushy. They talk about wanting to protect our legal system, and now it's Stushy. Well, just so you understand, folks, the reason why we need to have a separate bill here in Scotland is the Postmaster General has no power in Scotland. None. So the Postmaster General didn't bring any prosecutions in Scotland. That was left to the Lord Advocate. So, because the Lord Advocate brought these prosecutions on behalf of the Crown Office here in Scotland, we're going to have a separate bill to cover our separate legal system to pardon the postmasters, sub-postmasters and mistresses who have been convicted here in Scotland under the Horizon scandal. One of the reasons why they've done it, political football. Second reason why they've done it, it prevents people convicted here in Scotland for getting a quick resolution and getting their bloody compensation. Thank you, Austin. I'll put that up. As I say, what happens here is the pardons might slow it down, the compensation, but for avoidance of doubt, the Post Office Horizon System Compensation Bill was drafted to include Scotland, totally funded by the Department of Business and Trade at Westminster. Aye, but that's the compensation scheme. You've got to have been convicted, wrongfully convicted, to be able to qualify for it, and it'll be quicker if you've been pardoned. Hey, let's move on, shall we? So this idea that Holyrood's upset at having to pass a separate bloody bill to quash convictions, well, make your bloody mind up. Either we have a separate legal system and we deal with these issues ourselves, or we don't. Right, let's move on to the main story of the week so far. SNP Green Coalition comes to an end. Alright, this leads to anger from the Green Party. We've got wee Patrick and Lorna Slater saying that whom's a back down to the right wing of his party. Might well be true. But actually, as ministers, they haven't really managed to get much done. Lorna Slater, she's been blamed for the deposit return scheme. Of course, it wasn't her, it was Arthur Jack that sabotaged it with the Westminster government. It was political. And then, of course, there's all the stooshy about trans rights being pushed by the Greens. And then there's the fallout of having to scrap the 2030 net zero, a 75% reduction on carbon emissions target. And the stooshies would have continued, so it is probably the right time to end this coalition. Because as budget cuts come down the line, then the Scottish Government can't prioritise green policy or the well-being of the people, even though both are interlinked. Now, the Greens have been good, and they have pioneered some really good things here in Scotland and got them through. But going forward, to wind things up, unless we're independent, budgets are tightening, the projects the Greens want to spend on, we won't be able to spend on them, simple as that. So, now, this of course leads to opportunism with the cuckoos in the nest here in Scotland. The English parties who parade around Scotland as if they're Scottish parties. For those of you out with Scotland, the cuckoos in the nest here in Scotland are the Liberal Democrats, the Labour Party and the Conservative Party. Now, they all like to call themselves Scottish, but none of them are registered as a party in Scotland. They're all registered as parties in England. And apparently, the Greens were going to have a vote on whether they wanted to stay in the coalition sometime soon. They were holding an emergency conference to see if they wanted to stay in the coalition because of the movement and climate targets and things like that, and the stepping back for trans rights. So, what do you might call it? As I say, the cuckoos in the nest have become, opportunists in this one. And that was to be Dougie Ross calling for a vote of no confidence in First Minister Humza Yousaf. Now, with the Greens furious with the SNP don't have the numbers to win a vote of no confidence. If the Unions all get together and the Greens join them, and the Alpha Party, basically Ash Reagan, and she says she'll decide how she votes after she speaks to Humza. If I was Humza, I would blow my arse. But anyway, the Holyrood breakdown is as follows. The SNP did return 64 MPs, but with Ash Reagan walking the floor to the Alpha Party, that's now only 63. The Tories have got 31, Labour have got 22, the Lib Dems have got 4. So, between them, that's only 57. The SNP will outvote them. But if you throw in the one for the Alpha Party and the 7 for the Greens, if they vote with Tory, Labour and Lib Dems, if they vote with the cuckoos in the nest, then there would be a vote of no confidence in the First Minister. Now, would the First Minister be forced to step down? No. No, he wouldn't be. That would be up to Humza and any political pressure put on him by his own party and his own members. Now, if we Dougie Ross had been bright enough to know this, he would have called a vote of no confidence in the Scottish Government. Because then the First Minister and all the ministers would need to resign. Because the vote would be in the government. But as it's only in Humza Yousaf himself and not the Scottish Government, then no, he doesn't do nothing. I guess we Dougie Ross should have bored his arse reading the Scotland Act. Article 46 covers this particular one, Mr. Ross. Alright. Section 46 of the Scotland Act covers this one. And in the event that it was a vote of no confidence in the government, even then, it wouldn't lead to an election. Because the cuckoos in the nest would have 28 days to file an alternative First Minister. And it would be voted on until they found one, or until 28 days has passed. And then there'd be an election. But if Humza wants to put all this to bed, just call a fucking plebiscite election. We'll end the Union and take Holyrood back. So, aye, there's a bit of troublemaking going on here, but it's for the press. You can have a vote of no confidence in the First Minister. It makes no difference. Up to him how he responds to it. If we Dougie had bothered reading the Scotland Act and go as far as Section 48 or Section 46, which covers a vote of no confidence in an individual or a political party in government, he would have known he was wasting his fucking time. Now, do I think the vote of no confidence will be carried? Nah, I don't. Because of the way it's worded. Because when it says a vote of no confidence in Humza Yousaf because he's been useless in government, will the Greens vote for that? No, they were in government up till this morning. The Greens were in government with this morning. So no, listen, this is just another pie in the sky attempt with these nut jobs. Could there be trouble if people in the SNP abstained, the MSPs in the SNP abstained? And then the Greens abstained? Nah. Get on the Davy who abstains, it didn't, he couldn't. Just go to Davy who's got the majority. The SNP or the others. So if the Greens abstain, and a couple of SNP MSPs abstained, there'll still be enough to carry it for Humza. There you go. So no, I don't think this is going to make any difference. It did give Jabba the Hutt, one brain cell Bailey, and a few others a chance to go to BBC and tell us that this is a government of chaos and a government crisis. It's a government of chaos and crisis, is it? We've just had the economic reports out for Scotland. The way they're governed seems to be suiting everybody, including business. Say, what's it, JP Morgan and Chase, whatever the fuck they're called. They've just opened a 270,000 square foot facility in Glasgow. That doesn't show any confidence in the government or in the economy of Scotland. That shows plenty of confidence in the government and the economy in Scotland. Was there a vote or no confidence in Johnson? I don't think so. The cuckoos tried to pull a couple of votes of no confidence in Nicola and all. Never go anywhere as far as. I don't see this one getting off the ground either. You know, but that seems to be what's following the press today. Now, as for his reaction, SNP Westminster leader Stephen Flynn says he thinks that Holmes is acting in the best interest of the people of Scotland. Interesting. Anyway, one brain cell Bailey. She always cracks me up when they roll her out. Chaos in government. There's no chaos in government. NHS waiting lists are coming down. We're alleviating poverty. We're feeding kids in school. The economy's fucking booming. Inward migration's up. The tax system works brilliant. Progressive policies everywhere. Wow. Mental. But it will cause a wee stooshy for a couple of days until we get this vote out the bloody road. Waste of bloody time, as I say, but the mathematics. If Tory, Labour, Green, Lib Dem and Alba all club together, they'll just manage to say that they have no confidence in the First Minister. As long as the SNPs get confidence in him, it doesn't matter a fuck. It doesn't matter in the slightest. As I say, this relationship with the Greens was coming to an end. This was his Parliament. Thankfully. 2026, the next one, isn't it? So the plan is, going forward, the SNP will operate as a minority government. I wonder how that's going to go down south when they're looking up north and saying the SNP's run the single state dictatorship. It's raining in the east end of Glasgow, as it's that means the rain's coming here. I'll get you. Right, let's move on to wider issues out with Scotland. There are other stories here, you know, we've got a couple of big retail companies moving in. We've got a few businesses opening up. The business section's bouncing, actually, when it comes to it. Politics is flat as fuck as usual. Just as well we quit the Greens and the SNP have come to a partner of the ways, because otherwise what we'd be talking about here in Scotland is SNP bad as usual shite. Aye, that's true, Millie. Because Scotland's doing so well economically, Westminster is desperate to hold on to us. And Paul Fulton says the SNP the last Scottish election got 48% of the vote, giving them a minority government. Aye, you know, 48% of the vote and you get a minority government here in Scotland. It shows you how the system was rigged. It shows you how the system was rigged. Can we not call in Varford draws? No, chick, I'm sorry, we can't. That's only for instance on the park. That's no for tools at the side of the park. Var is a tool at the side of the park, so's Dross. Right, on a day of great shame, Monday into the early hours of Tuesday morning, the Rwanda bill was passed. Sunak's copper hoot. The right-wing gamins are going after nuts. Yay! We're going to get to send 200 people to Rwanda. It cost a 1.8 million quid a pop. Woohoo! Well, the people we send there are going to need that 1.8 million a pop. Because apparently the houses that were built to house these people have been sold off. And they'll need money to live off it. Because adult unemployment in Rwanda runs at 15% and youth unemployment in Rwanda runs at 20%. So when they get there, there's no fucking jobs and no prospects. And of course, there's no guarantee the Rwandan government will accept them. The shameful thing about this bill passing, though, is its ramifications worldwide, as we learn that the interim Prime Minister of Pakistan, I had his name written down. I couldn't bloody well pronounce it anyway. But anyway, the interim Prime Minister of Pakistan, as you know, they did away with the National Assembly and they've installed an interim Prime Minister until they sort the democracy and have fair elections. He's using the Rwanda bill passing. He's also cited it as his excuse to expel Afghanis in Pakistan who are seeking asylum. Just expel them. Yeah. If the UK doesn't need to accept and can make seeking asylum illegal, then so can Pakistan. So it gets to throw out all the Afghans. That will suit the UK because a lot of the Afghans that were going to Pakistan were applying there to get to come to the UK. As I say, about the bloody shame of it, the expense of it, the stupidity of it. And of course, in the committees, Sunak was asked about airplanes to take people there. And his answer in committee was, of course, that he didn't talk about the ongoing commercial negotiations. Fucking nobody wants to take these people. So the RAF will be getting it. Alright. And the UN have slapped the UK this week and all. The UN had made recommendations that the UK improve the conditions here for disabled people, and the UK has failed to do it. Now, what the UN is saying is that the state party has failed to take all appropriate measures to address grave and systematic violations in human rights of persons with disabilities and has failed to eliminate the root causes of inequality. The report follows up an inquiry in March where the government absolutely showed itself up by trying to make it sound like it cared about disabled people, which we know it did. The narrative down that road is absolutely appalling. In fact, it has led to an increase of hate crime against disabled people as the state labels disabled people as unworthy and a drain and people who are taking advantage of the system. It's absolutely atrocious. So as now when talking about some of the things that the UN were talking about, they were talking about benefit deaths and snooping on people with disabilities, and they were talking about the work capability assessment system being cruel. The evidence received revealed a disturbingly consistent theme: disabled people resorting to suicide following the denial of an adequate standard of living and social protections. Start with contradiction, the founding principles enshrined in the Human Rights Act. We are rapidly becoming a third world state with third world conditions. When your benefit system is causing deaths amongst a section of your society, then that is government policy causing death. And with the amount of people that austerity's killed, which is a government policy, I keep saying this, there's a genocide on. Here in these islands, it's deliberate policy driving people to early death, unnecessary death, with loss of dignity, self-respect. People are leaving us and are dying and committing suicide at an ebb so low where they have been stripped of their dignity and self-respect by that uncaring shower of shite in Westminster. And talking about uncaring shower of shites in Westminster, Chancellor Jeremy Hunt tells us he will slash 70,000 civil service jobs to finance a £20 billion increase in defence spending up to the end of the decade. A bit optimistic, isn't it? Fucker's not going to be in power by the end of the year. Anyway, the Public and Commercial Services Union said slashing to the civil service, or the slashing of the civil service, will lead to longer waits for passports, driving tests, and driving and vehicle licenses. So really know where the money's coming from. If you're working in driving standards agencies down that road, looks like you could be losing your bloody job. Anyway, the money saved by putting 70,000 people on the brew, 2.5 billion here, will go to aid to Ukraine, starting off with 500 million this year. And the extra money will bring spending on defence to 2.5% of GDP. Okay. Which is where it's supposed to be in NATO, actually. But slashing public services for the defence spend, when we know that the Ministry of Defence are not very good at spending money. We'll get Queen Elizabeth, which has been junked to keep the Prince of Wales floating. Absolute piece of scrap. The aircraft carriers we're talking about, would they cost about 3.2 billion each? Wow. Yeah. And then we'll get the Ajax tank carry on. 5.2 billion in, nothing delivered. I mean, the general staff are crap at procurement. What they are good at is, they are backhander. So, there's always money for war. In the previous instance, we're talking about people dying because of lack of adequate benefits to survive with any form of self-respect or dignity. There's plenty of money for war and the war machine. Mental. Right, talking of overspending, turns out, this one's a cracker by the way, the two facilities that were bought by the Home Office from the MOD, get this, they bought them, instead of just transferring them after all, we all own them, allegedly. Anyway, the Home Office buys two places for the MOD to house asylum seekers because it's supposed to save £5 million a year on hotels. Turns out it's not going to save a penny. The government said it would take £10 million to bring both RAF Scampton in Lincolnshire and Weatherfield in Essex up to scratch to house asylum seekers. What we find out now with the Finance Committee doing that road is Scampton's going to cost, just to make it habitable for asylum seekers, an additional 25.6 million quid. And to bring Weatherfield and Essex up to standard for people to be able to be accommodated there, it'll be 46 million quid. So 10 million just becomes 70 million. Wow. And so far, the spend on housing asylum seekers in these stupid places, like the Vivi Stockholm, 260 million so far. Mental. Get a lot of houses for that. So we could have. Anyway, Jeremy Hunt's in the Ukraine, telling the Ukrainians that getting rid of 70,000 civil servants to help finance them defeating Russia, which they're not going to do, is worth it. So we're going to throw billions away watching the Ukrainians get slaughtered by the Russians get slaughtered by the Ukrainians. And apparently it's worth it. Meanwhile, people here can't afford to feed themselves, can't afford to put their heating on, and if you're on disability benefits, you're talking yourself because you have no dignity in life. None. Oh, fucking disaster, their place. So it is. Absolute disaster, their place in the UK. Absolute disaster. Right, what's going on in Gaza? What we do know is that between Germany and America, they'll try to clamp down on protests against the genocide in Gaza. What we got? Well, we got UN horrified by Gaza hospital a mass grave report. We've got to bury these people somewhere. Next to the hospital where they die makes sort of sense, does it not? Anyway, the UN are horrified. As we know, Israel's blocking all sorts of investigations by the UN, and the UN are calling for an investigation into these mass graves. But as I say, what you'll find is up with the Palestinians that will have dug these and go to put people somewhere, you know, once they're gone. Israeli family members of the hostages in Gaza tell the Gazan hostages to stay strong. And tents and hardware are being moved in to accommodate Israeli soldiers as they prepare for an offensive on Rafah. Now, as we know, Rafah is hosting almost all of the population of Gaza and the city itself. When the Israelis go in, they are going to murder thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of innocent people That's if there's any of them left. Because we know disease, famine is running a savvy, and it's taking more people than bullets at the moment. I've said this repeatedly. I'll say it again. The clock's ticking. With disease rife, with the famine, the man-made famine, the using of food as a weapon of war, we'll see that population wiped out in about 10 weeks. I've been saying it for a couple of weeks now. I started off at 12 weeks, for 10 weeks now, I think we're 4 programs in. So these people don't belong at all. And the idea that there's going to be an offensive against the people who are too weak to defend themselves. And I see Labour have suspended another local council candidate for criticising Israel and calling Israel a terrorist state. So apparently, and the way that's been reported, by the way, is that this particular person was posting anti-Israeli comments or anti-Semitic comments. None of these things are anti-Semitic or anti-Jewish people. All these things are targeted at the administration in Israel. Let me make that quite clear. Now, Israel's been breaking international law and getting away with it for too bloody long. It has to stop. And I hear the International Court of Justice are thinking about it, issuing an arrest warrant for Netanyahu and his ministers. I'd like to see it happen. I would like to see him dragged into the Hague for the genocide which is taking place in Gaza. So, plenty of fun in politics at the moment. I wasn't covering 2 horses running about London. You know, if the household guard wants to let their horses stampede, that's up to the household guard, isn't it? Hey, I'm not interested in that at all, actually. Well, we'll just quick flick through and see what is happening in Ukraine. We'll always see if there's anything important. Ukraine uses longer range US missiles for first time. And they're saying that Putin's using chemical weapons and Zelensky's now pleading for gas masks for his people. I don't know the truth of it. So that's the big stories in Ukraine. They started using the missiles that the Americans have sent to them, long-range missiles, and apparently the Russians have started using chemical weapons against the Ukrainians. An announcement to come, Dean, isn't there? Friday, going to be a big one. I don't know. I take this day to day, same as the rest of you. Just that twice a week I pop my head above a parapet to talk about it and to give my opinion on some of it. But as I say, you won't hear about the UN wrapping the UK again this week. You won't hear that in the mainstream media. But you got to hear. And if you're interested, you also find it on the Canary. All right, alternative media out there. Remember, folks, there's a lot of good alternative media. You get Max covers politics. Reagan Elite covers politics. Daily Blase covers the committees in politics. So there's a lot of good information and good shows out there. So I would suggest you look at some of these channels, Big Mad Studio and things like that, out there on YouTube, as well as some of the bigger ones like Truth to Power, No Justice, Navarra Media, Double Down News, Byline Times. There's really good independent media out there, folks. Use it. Right, I'm going to wind this one up, folks. Say the press is having a field day here in Scotland because of the end of the coalition deal between the Greens and the SNP. We'll see how that goes. Now, Stephen Flynn is encouraging people to join the SNP. Our TELT membership is up 8,000. If you're not a member, join. If you don't intend to join a political party when this election comes along, remember here in Scotland, you're trooping into the box. If you're moving into the box to fill out your ballot paper, put your cross in the SNP box. It's the only way to go. Now, you see, the other thing is, folks, get yourself ID to vote. We've got the council elections coming up rapid down that road and in Wales. And depending on how that goes, we could see Sunak forced out. Now, a couple of other things that drew to my attention at the weekend. Get counted for yes. Apparently there's an app you can download. It's called the indieapp.scot, where you can register your intentions on independence, apparently. And that way they can keep a tally. See the amount of these things we've went through is mental. Yeah. I mean, there's been a good few of these people try to sign the papers. We've had online apps for people to join up. They just don't. Thomas, you want to write a song for John McLean? You go right ahead. I would check out his history. An educator, John McLean was. Spent a fair bit of time in jail and all because of his activism. He was an educator, a teacher. Right, as I say, eyes on the prize, election year. Yeah. If you're a member of the Yes movement, if you are for independence in Scotland, it's time to put your political points of view in your pocket when it comes to this election. There's only one party that makes any sense to vote for in this election, and that's the SNP. Okay. Look after yourselves, folks. I'll be back on Monday to do it all again. Hopefully, by that time, they'll have David's pain meds and that sorted out, and he'll be fit to join us again. So, you guys, look after yourself. Catch us later. Bye for now.